This is a brief overview about how to obtain off-campus work authorization. Um, that does not mean that every single one of you qualifies for off-campus work authorization. So keep in mind that there are still heavy restrictions, unfortunately, for international students and their ability to get employment while they're in the United States. And this is an overview. So if you're not sure, hopefully, by the end of this presentation, hopefully you will be able to know if you're eligible for off-campus work authorization and what your next step need to be if you decide you want to take the route of gaining off-campus work authorization. Let's see. So there are two types that are the most heavily used type of off-campus work for F1 students. That's called CPT and OPT. You've probably heard those terms before. CPT is curricular practical training. It's an internship or other type of required practicum if you are a nursing major or an education major that does shadowing in the classroom or at the hospital, or if you play gigs as a musician, if it's a required or what the government defers to as integral part of your degree program, then you can apply for curricular practical training. So it has to be a required part of your program or integral to your degree. Now, to know if your different major, because there's tons of different majors on campus, to know if you have a required internship or some sort of practicum, you need to communicate with your academic advisor, and they can tell you what the requirements are as far as interns and things like that. There's some I know just like off the top of my head, like Tabor School of Business students. I'm almost positive that every single Tabor business student is required to have an off-campus internship as part of their degree. Thus, by default, you would be eligible to apply for CPT. So it has to be related, of course, to your major since it's an internship. So what that means is that you can get authorization to work anywhere in the United States, and it can be part-time or full-time for CPT. But it's limited by the requirements of your major. Most of you have a 3 credit hour, maybe 4 credit hour internship requirement, and that means you're going to only be eligible for CPT for 1 semester. And you can do it over the summer or the January term, but anytime that you're working more than 20 hours a week, it has to be during an official break, of course, just like any sort of on-campus work that you do. And if you are participating in anything that is considered full-time or 40 hours a week, every week or month or whatever that you work full-time for CPT cuts into your 12 months of OPT, which is the second category of work authorization. I know that that is really like convoluted and confusing. So if you're like, what does that mean exactly? Just you can get clarification at a later time. But my recommendation is, of course, that you do not do full-time CPT, that you limit yourself to part-time 20 hours a week so that you don't have to worry about it cutting into your OPT after graduation. The other type of off-campus work authorization is optional practical training, or OPT. You will apply for OPT after graduation. So CPT is while you're still here before you complete your bachelor's or whatever your program is. And then OPT is after you graduate. You're not taking classes anymore. You can and need to work full time. You can work anywhere in the United States as long as your work is related directly to your major. So one thing about OPT that I've noticed as students get closer to their graduation time, these things tend to like sneak up on you a little bit, and they want to know about how to plan their future, either in the US or while they're waiting for grad school, or because they do want more job opportunities. So please consider that there are a limited number of STEM majors that would allow you to do a 24-month STEM extension. So if you're not a STEM major, you qualify for 12 months only of OPT, nothing else, for each program of study that you have. So when you complete your bachelor's, you get 12 months of OPT. When you complete your master's, you get 12 months of OPT. If you complete your PhD, you get 12 months of OPT. Each different degree that you get 12 months of OPT. If you do that in STEM fields, you qualify for STEM extension, which is a 24-month extension. So you're looking at, instead of just 1 year, having 3 years. Significantly different. If you know you want to work in the United States after you graduate, then you need to be in a STEM major. And the way to know, not every STEM, like some students think, okay, STEM, nursing, right? It's definitely science. It's in the medical field. STEM does not qualify according to the USCIS list of majors. Nursing is not on here. So this PowerPoint is going to be available through your Moodle International Student page. And this STEM extension link here takes you to this list of qualifying STEM extensions if that's something that you know you're interested in. And if you look for nursing, you'll see 0 out of 0, there's no nursing options. But something like computer science is there, and you would be eligible under a major like computer science, data processing, computer programming, IT. There's some other environmental majors, engineering majors, math majors. So make sure that if STEM extension and working in the US is something that is interesting or interested, if you're interested in doing that, then you have the proper major. If you're an international business major, an accounting major, music major, you have 12 months of work after graduation and then nothing else. You have no other path at all to being here legally. And that is like such a brutal thing to say, but I want you guys to know it because it's true and it's important, and you need to be able to plan your future. And so just know that you don't really have a path after that 12-month OPT training unless you're a STEM extension. If you aren't STEM extension and you want to stay in the United States, then you need to talk with an immigration attorney about your options for applying for citizenship or permanent residency. Moving right along, you can apply for CPT after you have completed 1 academic year at Millikan. So you cannot apply for off-campus work as a freshman, but for your senior year or for your sophomore, junior, and senior years, if it is required and you are registered for an internship credit, then you can get authorization for CPT. The authorization for CPT comes through our office. And even if you talk to your academic advisor, they're not going to know that you as an F1 student have to get authorization through me. They're going to tell you what you need to do and who you need to talk to as far as the registrar and maybe a job fair or something, but it's your responsibility to know that you're an F1 student and you have to get work authorization through the CIE. But it's very easy as long as you have an employment letter and you're registered for a credit. I will give you work authorization to do CPT, print you a new I-20, and you'll be good to go for your internship. If you don't go through the CIE process and you do your internship off campus because your advisor told you that you had all the paperwork done and it was no big deal, you have just engaged in illegal work, and your ability to stay in the United States is incredibly fragile and put at risk through your own neglect. So make sure that you know the requirements of your F1 visa, because your academic advisor and the registrar and the person who hires you isn't going to know anything about it, and it's not their responsibility, it's yours. To qualify for OPT is a different process. I don't approve OPT like I approve CPT. The US government approves OPT. It has to go through USCIS. So the application process is much longer and much different. It's not hard by any means, but you need to make sure that you're planning ahead. So for OPT, you have to request your OPT approval 90 days before graduation is the soonest that you can request your OPT. And then the idea then would be that you're giving the US government 90 days to review the application so that you can commence work as soon as you graduate. And then you fill out a whole slew of information, including an I-765 and the supporting documentation that the government requires, and a fact check of $410 US for them to review the information and approve it. The approval process is one that's pretty straightforward, and in the past, I mean, knock on wood, I don't want to jinx anyone, we've never had an OPT application be denied. So as long as all your ducks are in a row, then it will be easy for you to get authorization for OPT once you graduate. Unfortunately, just like everything with the US government, the timeline and process for an OPT application is confusing and convoluted. So you will be able to also review on your Moodle shell this OPT timeline, because there are things that you have to be able to decide. So like I said, 90 days before you graduate is the soonest that you can apply, and you need to come and meet with me at the beginning of the semester before you graduate. If you're going to graduate in December, you need to come talk to me in August. If you're going to graduate in May, you need to come talk to me in January to give you ample time to get the information and complete the application. Then from there, you have to decide what your OPT start date is going to be. You have to make sure that you get your OPT application submitted before the deadline, and then you have to wait for the approval process. You cannot leave the country while you're pending change of status and your OPT is being approved. So again, it's important to apply early so that if you do want to go home for a couple of weeks after you graduate before you start working, you can do that. If you're still waiting for your OPT to be approved, you cannot leave the country at all. You have 12 months, and then you have a 60-day grace period. If you have your OPT start date falling after your graduation date, it is eating into your 60-day grace period as well. So keep that in mind if you're planning to travel or take some time off. You're eligible for 90 days of unemployment throughout the entire 12 months of OPT. You cannot exceed 90 days of unemployment. Then I don't know if I mentioned this before, but you get, oh no, I definitely did, that you get OPT authorization for each program. So a lot of students will graduate with their undergrad, then they will spend a year working in the United States while they apply for grad school. And then they will transfer their I-20 from Millikan, their OPT I-20, to grad school and do grad school, and then they can do another year of OPT after that. So what should you do next? If this is a path that you want to take, if you're pretty new in your career at Millikan and you're a freshman or a sophomore, then you're wanting to do CPT, then you need to start by talking to your academic advisor to see if CPT is something that you are eligible for. If you find out that an internship or a practicum is an integral or required part of your degree, then you can go through the registration process and start looking for a job. And once you get a job, then you will get the CIE's approval. So the instructions, oh, that's not it. So the instructions for CPT are very straightforward. I'm hoping you guys can actually see these things whenever I. So the instructions for CPT, like I said, pretty straightforward. Step one, you make sure that it's a required part of your degree, and then you bring that information to the CIE and get an employer and a new I-20, and then you submit this offer letter that is from the employer on the employer's letterhead that explains who you are, what you'll be doing, how long you'll be doing it, where you'll be doing the work at, so that I can put that in your file. And then if you're doing OPT, you will follow all of these beautiful steps. Again, it's much longer because there's so many more documents that you have to submit to USCIS before they will approve your work. So make sure that you start that planning process early. Make sure you decide if STEM extensions are something that is important to your future as, you know, a student and in your career after graduation. So change your major if it's something that is important to you. Make sure that you do it early. Again, if you're a senior and you're just now realizing this information, it's probably a little late, and you always have grad school to change to something in STEM. Just make sure that you're checking that list and you know what majors qualify and what don't, because they're not always super obvious. The other thing is to make sure that you're meeting with the CIE regularly to get answers, questions answered, and clarification where you're confused. And remember, like always, that working without authorization is illegal, even if it doesn't seem like it, or if no one says anything to you. You're putting your future at risk if you do partake in unauthorized work, and that includes volunteering or unpaid internships. Maybe you'll tell someone, well, I'm an international student, so I don't qualify for that type of work, and they'll say, oh, well, you can do it for free, or you can just volunteer in our office. That is still illegal. That's exploiting students, especially if someone is getting paid to do the work that you're not getting paid to do. The US government still considers that work not volunteering, and it is illegal. So as always, if you need clarification on anything and want to check and see what your options are, you can come talk to me or set up a meeting. And then there's information further about everything in your visa status, but especially work authorization through a website that hopefully you guys are familiar with, called Study in the States. And if you go to students and then click on training opportunities, you will find all of that lovely information that we just talked about right here on the USCIS website. So what kind of questions do you guys have for me now?
Hey, Brianna, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Just a quick one though. I'm considering grad school, so I just want to know how the process works of transferring the CVIP, or for example, if I start a grad school next year of fall, and my visa expires in June of next year. So does my my I-20, I guess. So when would be the best time for me to? Because I don't hear from grad school until May or June, the decision. So it's
When
kind of a thin rope for me to ride on.
when do you when does your graduation from Millikan?
May next 2021.
Okay, so your I-20 end date will be in May of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And then are you going to apply for OPT? Is
I'm
that your
not
plan?
sure because there are two options, because I may work and I may go to grad school. So I wanted to know, because OPT you already explained, right? I have to have something in place in January or February. But if I go to grad school, I don't get their decision until June of next year.
Well, you
So
have a 60-day grace period after graduation. So June is within 60 days of graduating. So you can just hang out and wait. Um,
Mhm.
and then you can technically apply for OPT up to 60 days after graduation. So if you don't get into the grad school that you want, you can
Mhm.
apply for OPT in June. It's just going to cut into your unemployment time while you're waiting for them to approve.
Gotcha. Because that grad school also has the stipend in place. So I don't know if I'm on F1, would I still need to apply for that? I mean, of course, that question would be for them, but do you happen to know anything about that?
No, I don't know anything about that.
I see. Okay. Gotcha.
But when would you start grad school?
August 2021.
So you are still going to have to either leave the country or apply for OPT, because August is more than 90 days away from May,
Yes.
and you're only allowed to enter the country 30 days before your next program start. So
Okay.
it would be end of July. So you'd have like a month there where you technically were out of status. So you would need to plan to go home,
Yes.
or instead of you could work all summer and you could apply for OPT to
Mhm.
begin in May once you graduate,
Mhm.
and you could work, and then once you start your grad program,
Mhm.
your I-20 will be transferred to your new school and your OPT will automatically end and your graduate program will begin. So
Gotcha.
if you wanted to stay in the States and work all summer long,
Mhm.
you're eligible to do that and it won't cut into anything, and
Gotcha.
you'll be able to work and stuff while you wait.
Sure, sure. But what happens to the visa though? How does I get that stamp? How does?
Your visa is like your key. It doesn't need to be valid while you're in the United States. It can completely expire. It doesn't matter unless you leave the country. Then
Mhm.
if you decide to leave the US, you have to go to an embassy and get it renewed before you can re-enter.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. What other questions do you guys have? Okay, well, if you think of questions, then please email them to me whenever, if you need answers to anything, or if it's easier to set up a meeting and talk about these sorts of things. I know, like I said, it can be very confusing, I think, as far as what's allowed and when you should do it and all of that stuff. I know the planning process is overwhelming. And I know that for some of you, it might seem like graduation is a long ways away, but it's going to come up sooner than you think. So make sure that you're planning well in advance, and that you know what the requirements are for all of your programming.
I got one more, unless someone has another one or any.
You're okay, Parag. What's your question?
Okay. Yeah. So about the OPT and CPT time, I remember you mentioned that if you use your CPT full time, it will cut into your OPT. So I don't know. I don't quite remember if I did CPT full time when I did for Northwestern Mutual, because I did it in 2 credits one semester and then 1 credit the next semester.
Did you
So
work more than 20 hours a week at all?
I don't think so. I don't
Then
think.
you didn't do anything full time.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. But is there a way I can check it, or I mean,
The
how?
only way you can check it is by reviewing your own pay stub.
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you.
And Parag brings up a good point that I think I'll mention, that I'm never going to know if you're actually working 20 hours a week or 40 hours a week or what you're doing. It will be once you try to get your OPT approval, or you try to transfer, or you try to get a new visa, that some random US government employee, CBP officer, DHS officer is going to look at your old pay stubs that I don't have access to, or your taxes to see if you've applied, or your CPT, or whatever illegal work authorization, and they're going to deny you based on those things that you thought that you got away with. Everything has a paper trail, everything. So even if you think that you haven't been caught, it will come back and to bite you 10 years later. So please make sure that you do know how many hours a week that you're working, that if your employer is scheduling you for 24 hours every week instead of 20, that you go in and tell them, I cannot legally do this work, this 4 extra hours. I cannot. It's against the law for me to do this. And you're putting my future at risk by asking me to do it. That's not something that a good manager would do. But again, it's your responsibility. You have to tell your employer that you can't work more than 20 hours a week and that sort of piece, even on campus work. So just keep that in mind, that no one's going to keep those checks and balances in place for you. It's your responsibility to maintain your status. Any other questions? Okay, well, I hope that wasn't too confusing. I did record it all, and I will upload all of that information, those forms, the links, the PowerPoint, everything, so that you guys can have access to that, review it, talk to your advisor about it, and let me know whenever you're ready to get authorized for off-campus work. Thanks.